My very first episode, it was so awkward. Now we're going to do this over here, and it wasn't me, you know? So
Mhm.
I told the wife, I said, "Baloney with that. It's gonna be me because I am who I
Mhm.
am, and that's just the way it is."
In the world of grease and cold starts, a lost cast member is usually just someone who stepped out for a cold snack. But lately, the rumor mill has been churning faster than a small block Chevy with a vacuum leak. From whispers of legal lockups to tragic headlines, fans are asking, what really happened to the Vice Grip crew? We're diving into the grit, the gearheads, and the mischief that defines the VGG family in 2026. Let's get into it. Derek Bieri, the weight of the crown and the high-stakes hustle. When people talk about Derek Bieri, they usually mention the guy in the plaid shirt who can make a car run on a prayer and some ether. But by 2026, people's appetite for drama has turned his name into a magnet for some truly wild stories. If you spend 5 minutes over the internet, you'll see the questions popping up like bad rust bubbles. Is Derek in jail? Did he finally get hauled off for some sort of trouble involving a titleless car? Or a highway patrolman who didn't appreciate a car with no floorboards? The short answer is a hard no, but the long answer is a fascinating look at how a simple guy from Minnesota ended up in a pressure cooker that almost cost him everything. The Derek is in jail rumors didn't start from nowhere. In the world of automotive, there's a recurring trope of creators getting into legal hot water over everything from dangerous stunts to tax issues. Fans saw Derek's sudden move from his quiet home base in Minnesota down to the hills of Tennessee and assumed he was running from something. They saw the no-reserve auctions of his most iconic cars and thought he was liquidating assets to pay for a high-priced legal defense. In reality, the mischief Derek was dealing with wasn't a court date. It was a survival crisis. Success in the digital age is a double-edged sword, and for Derek, the blade was starting to get uncomfortably close to his neck. Let's talk about the actual mischief, the 2023 shop accident that stayed quiet for a long time. People often confuse missing in action with locked up. When Derek went silent for a stretch, the narratives filled the void. The truth was far more grounded and terrifying. Working alone late at night, a VGG staple, nearly led to a catastrophe involving a heavy truck lift and a lapse in safety protocol. He didn't end up in a jail cell. He ended up on a shop floor, staring at the ceiling and wondering if this was how the story ended. That incident changed his perspective on the one-man show model. It forced him to realize that the persona of the invincible grease monkey was a dangerous lie. He had to pivot, and that pivot looked like chaos to the outside world. Then there's the part of the fans. As Derek's star rose, so did the number of people who felt they owned a piece of him. We aren't just talking about people asking for a selfie at a gas station. By 2025, the Bieri family was dealing with legitimate security threats. People were showing up at their private residence uninvited at all hours of the night, thinking they could just walk into the shop and grab a cold snack. Imagine trying to raise a family while strangers are peeking through your garage windows because they saw your house on a Zillow scraping website. This is the jail Derek actually lived in for a while, a prison of his own fame. The move to Tennessee wasn't a flight from the law. It was a desperate search for a fortress where he could breathe without a camera lens or a stalker following his every move. The talk about legal trouble often stem from the gray area of how Derek acquires and drives his rescues. Let's be real. Driving a 1972 Cadillac with no brakes, a fuel jug strapped to the roof, and a tag that expired during the Nixon administration is technically a crime in about 50 states. But Derek has mastered the art of polite mischief. He knows how to talk to a state trooper with a smile and a jeer that usually earns him a warning instead of a pair of handcuffs. However, the fans and non-fans love to take a photo of a VGG car on a flatbed and spin a narrative that the feds finally caught up to him. In 2026, those stories have become a currency of their own, even though Derek remains one of the most law-abiding lawbreakers in the automotive community. What about the financial issue? When Derek started selling off his keepers, the cars we all thought he'd never part with, the money trouble rumors caught fire. People speculated that he was being sued by former partners, or that the IRS had taken an interest in his junk mail car purchases. The reality is that Derek is a businessman who realized that owning 50 cars is a job, not a hobby. The mischief was simply the realization that he was drowning in steel. Every car was a project, and every project was a weight. By liquidating the collection, he wasn't paying off a lawyer. He was buying back his time. He was choosing to be a father and a husband over being a museum curator for a bunch of 70s land yachts. The emotional toll of being Derek from Vice Grip Garage is the part the fans rarely see. They see the jokes about the thunder and the creative names for engine parts, but they don't see the man who stays up until 3 a.m. editing footage because he's a perfectionist. They don't see the guy who feels the weight of dozens of employees' livelihoods on his shoulders. In 2026, the mischief is the constant battle against burnout. Derek has had to learn how to say no, which often looks like disappearing to the casual viewer. When a video doesn't drop on time, the comments section turns into a morgue or a police station. Is he dead? Is he in jail? No, he's probably just taking a nap or watching a high school football game like a normal human being. The most riveting part of Derek's journey isn't the fake drama. It's the sheer resilience required to stay authentic in a world that wants him to be a caricature. He's had to navigate the transition from a guy in a garage to a media mogul without losing the soul of the channel. That involves a lot of behind-the-scenes mischief, including intense negotiations with networks and sponsors who want him to clean up his act. Derek has fought tooth and nail to keep the dirt under his fingernails and the low-budget feel of his videos, even as the budgets have grown into the millions. He's not in jail, and he's certainly not dead. But the Derek Bieri of 2026 is a much more guarded, strategic version of the guy we first met. He hasn't traded his plaid shirt for an orange jumpsuit yet, and based on the way he's handling the pressure these days, he probably never will. He's too busy looking for the next right one to let a little bit of gossip slow him down. But Derek isn't the only one who's stared down a dark path while holding a wrench. Jessica Bieri, the backbone and the brake. If Derek is the visible spark plug of the operation, Jessica is the high-voltage battery that actually keeps the lights on. For years, she was a constant presence, the calm voice of reason, while her husband tried to convince a rusted-out chassis to make a 300-mile trek. But as the calendar flipped into 2026, her disappearance from the screen sparked a firestorm of speculation. When a familiar face stops showing up in the frame, the internet doesn't just assume they're busy, it assumes the worst. Words began to swirl that she had walked away, that the marriage was on the rocks, or even that she was dealing with a private legal battle that kept her sidelined. The reality of her situation is far more grounded, though no less intense. Jessica didn't vanish because of a scandal or a fallout. She stepped back to manage the explosion of a digital empire that had grown too large for a kitchen table operation. The trouble she faced was the sheer gravity of success. By 2024, the brand wasn't just about fixing old junkers. It was a sprawling enterprise involving apparel lines, television contracts, and a massive real estate transition. Jessica became the de facto CEO of a multi-million-dollar circus. While fans were wondering why she wasn't handing Derek a 9/16 wrench on camera, she was likely in a boardroom or on a call with a fleet of attorneys, protecting the family's intellectual property from vultures. However, there was a darker side to her retreat from the public eye. One of the most riveting and terrifying issues the family faced involved a series of security breaches at their previous home. It's one thing to have fans, it's another to have people who don't understand boundaries. Jessica, as the mother of their children, had to draw a hard line in the grease. The decision to move and essentially go dark regarding their physical location was a survival tactic. People were speculating that she was hiding something from the law, but she was actually hiding her family from the more unstable corners of the public. The jail she was in was one of constant surveillance, where stepping onto her own porch felt like a public performance. There's also the mental toll of being the voice of sanity in a world that rewards chaos. Jessica has often been the one to pull the emergency brake when Derek's ideas got too dangerous or expensive. In 2025, there were whispers that she had finally reached her limit with the death trap lifestyle. Every time a car with no floors or questionable steering left the driveway, she was the one staying home, waiting for the phone call that never came. That kind of chronic stress isn't a headline-grabbing crime, but it's a heavy burden. Her absence from recent projects wasn't a sign of a split, as the gossip sites claimed. It was a necessary boundary to keep her own sanity intact, while the brand continued its relentless march forward. The financial shenanigans that people love to pin on her are equally baseless, but tell a story of modern fame. Because Jessica handles the books, any time a major asset was sold, like the beloved Independence truck or their Minnesota shop, the commenters pointed fingers at her. They painted a picture of a gold digger liquidating the dream, when in fact, she was the one ensuring they didn't end up bankrupt like so many others who hit it big quickly. She navigated the transition from a modest life to one of significant wealth with a level of scrutiny that would break most people. She wasn't spending the bail money, as one viral thread suggested. She was diversifying their future so their kids wouldn't have to spend their lives scrubbing parts in a cold garage if they didn't want to. Interestingly, the dead or in jail claims often targeted her through proxy. When Derek would make a joke about being in the doghouse, the literal-minded corners of the web would spin a narrative of domestic turmoil. In 2026, Jessica has become a bit of a ghost in the machine by choice. She realized that the more she gave to the camera, the less she had for herself. Her mishaps are the kind we all face: burnout, exhaustion, and the struggle to balance a career with a soul. But because she's married to a man who lives his life in the shop light, her desire for privacy was interpreted as a red flag. Behind the scenes, her influence has actually tripled. She's the one who vetted the new production partners and made sure that the corporate version of their life didn't scrub away the grit that made them famous. If there was any trouble in the Bieri household, it was the healthy kind, the friction of two people trying to stay grounded while their lives turned into a whirlwind. She isn't behind bars, and she certainly hasn't left the building. She's just moved into the shadows where she can pull the strings without having to worry about if her hair looks right for a thumbnail. Jessica is the reason the wheels haven't fallen off this entire operation, even if she's no longer the one sitting in the passenger seat for every road trip. While the forums keep debating her whereabouts and her legal status, she's likely laughing all the way to the bank, or at least to a quiet dinner where no one is filming the appetizers. The transition from being a character to being a person is a move many in this industry fail to make. Jessica did it with grace, even if it meant letting the speculations run wild for a while. She understood that you can't control what people say, but you can control what you give them. By giving them nothing, she took back everything. Sometimes the biggest issues aren't with the people, but the machines that try to kill them. Shawn from Junkyard Digs, the partner in crime. If you've watched enough of these rescues, you know that Shawn is the closest thing Derek has to a partner in absolute chaos. Their chemistry is built on a shared love for things that should have been crushed decades ago. And because they are so often seen together, their fates are linked in the eyes of the public. By 2026, the talks surrounding Shawn have taken a particularly dark turn. Because he occasionally disappears from his own channel to focus on massive, behind-the-scenes builds or to help the VGG crew with their heavy lifting, the Shawn is dead or Shawn is in the hospital headlines have become a recurring nightmare for his actual friends and family. It's the cost of being a regular in a high-stakes world where one slipped jack or one failed brake line can change everything in a heartbeat. The most riveting aspect of Shawn's journey isn't some fake obituary, but the very real physical toll of the lifestyle. These guys aren't working in pristine, climate-controlled shops with safety inspectors breathing down their necks. They are in muddy fields, under rusting frames that weigh 4,000 pounds, often using tools that were repaired with electrical tape and hope. The rumors of his demise usually follow a particularly sketchy video where something goes wrong: a fire in the cabin, a tire blowout at highway speeds, or a narrow escape from a collapsing barn. In 2025, a specific incident involving a heavy-duty winching failure led to a flurry of rest-in-peace posts on social media. Shawn wasn't dead. He was just dealing with the aftermath of a close call that would have made a normal person quit the hobby forever. Beyond the physical danger, there's the legal trouble narrative. Because Shawn and Derek often deal with vehicles that have lost their paperwork over the last 40 years, some viewers are convinced they are running a sophisticated car theft ring. They see the guys hauling a car out of a woods at 2 a.m. and assume they're dodging the authorities. This has led to persistent whispers that Shawn has spent time behind bars for title jumping or illegal salvaging. The reality is far more tedious. It involves months of paperwork, endless calls to the DMV, and the slow, grinding gears of bureaucracy. Shawn hasn't been in a jail cell, but he's definitely spent his fair share of time in the purgatory of government offices trying to make an honest car out of a pile of parts. There is also the fallout drama. Fans love a good rivalry, and when Shawn and Derek don't collab for a few months, the narrative shifts to a supposed blood feud. People claim that Shawn was fired from the VGG inner circle, or that a legal dispute over equipment had ended their friendship. In truth, the complication is just logistics. Shawn has his own empire to run, his own fleet of dying trucks to revive, and his own life in Iowa. The trouble is simply the difficulty of aligning the schedules of two of the busiest guys in the automotive world. They aren't avoiding each other because of a lawsuit. They're just both buried up to their elbows in transmission fluid and deadlines. Shawn's role in the 2026 landscape is that of the resilient underdog. He often takes on the projects that even Derek might find too far gone, and that take-no-prisoners attitude is exactly what feeds the rumor mill. When he takes a break to recharge or deal with the burnout that naturally comes from filming and wrenching 80 hours a week, the silence is interpreted as a tragedy. But the Shawn we see in 2026 is a survivor. He has learned to lean into the absurdity of the stories, sometimes even poking fun at his own demise in his video titles. It's a survival mechanism in an industry that demands constant, dangerous output for the sake of the algorithm. The most fascinating part of his story is how he handles the near misses. There have been moments on camera where Shawn's face goes pale, Not because of a script, but because he realized how close he came to a life-altering injury. Those are the moments that the "is he dead" crowd latches onto. But Shawn's shenanigans are always calculated. He's a smarter mechanic than the Digs persona might suggest, and his ability to navigate the fine line between a successful rescue and a total disaster is what keeps people watching. He's not a ghost, and he's not a convict. He's just a guy who refuses to let a little bit of rust and a lot of story stand in the way of a good story. As the VGG universe expands, Shawn remains the primary anchor for the old-school feel of the brand. While Derek's production value has climbed, Shawn still feels like the guy who would help you change a starter in a gas station parking lot during a blizzard. That relatability is why the claims hit so hard. People feel like they know him, so when a clickbait site says he's in trouble, the panic is real. But rest assured, by mid-2026, Shawn is still out there, probably fighting a stuck bolt or trying to convince a dead battery to give him one more crank. He's living proof that you can survive the internet's obsession with tragedy as long as you keep your head down and your wrenches turning. He isn't going anywhere, and the only bars he's likely to be behind are the ones on a roll cage he's welding together for the next adventure. Is it a crime to be this sketchy, or just a legal gray area? The production crew, the ghosts in the lens. As the operations transitioned into a polished professional production by 2026, a new brand of speculation emerged. Fans who had grown accustomed to the shaky, handheld aesthetic and the occasional reflection of a family member in a dusty window started noticing something different. The shots were too steady, the lighting was too consistent, and the drone work was far too precise for a one-man show. This shift signaled the arrival of a dedicated crew. However, because these individuals often remain unnamed to preserve the lone mechanic magic, they have become subjects of bizarre urban legends. When a face briefly appears and then never returns, viewers assume the worst, either a dramatic blowout or legal hot water. The disappearing cameraman syndrome is a real phenomenon. In the early days, Derek's kids or Muffler Chad caught glimpses of the action. As the stakes grew, a professional crew became undeniable. One thing from early 2025 involved a lead editor allegedly escorted from the premises by authorities. The story claimed a dispute over footage ownership ended in a physical altercation and a trip to jail. In reality, it was just a standard non-disclosure agreement and a freelancer moving to a bigger network. The jail was actually a quiet exit from a high-pressure environment where the hours are long and the mosquitoes are relentless. There is also the theory that secret crew members are doing time for sketchy road trips. Since some rescues push legal limits on public highways, a low camera angle or a blurred face sends the comments section into detective mode. Fans speculate that certain background mechanics are hiding from warrants. The truth is less cinematic. Most of these guys have families and simply do not want their faces plastered across a channel with millions of viewers. They aren't hiding from a marshal. They are avoiding the overwhelming scrutiny of the digital public. Turnover in a shop specializing in run and drive disasters is naturally high. It takes a specific temperament to spend 14 hours in a Tennessee summer filming someone hit a starter with a hammer while gasoline drips near a hot work light. Many missing members are simply victims of the grind. By 2026, several videographers have moved on, with each exit treated like a cliffhanger. Fans ask if the drone guy was arrested for trespassing in a junkyard when he likely just took a job filming weddings instead of rusted-out Pontiacs in a swamp. Ultimately, these anonymous ghosts in the lens are the unsung heroes making the chaos look good in 4K minor legal friction, like a production van being detained at a way station over a missing trailer VIN is the grease that keeps the mill turning. But in 2026, the crew is just a specialized strike team. They aren't convicts or corporate spies. They are just talented professionals with high rust tolerance. David Fryberger, the Titan and the corporate cage. By 2026, David Fryberger has moved from being a mentor in the distance to a full-fledged member of the VGG cinematic universe. But with that crossover came a wave of end-of-an-era rumors that make Derek's shop accidents look like small potatoes. Because David is a legend, the guy who literally wrote the book on the modern will-it-run genre, his every move is analyzed with a microscope. When Motor Trend pulled the plug on the original Roadkill production in late 2024, the public didn't just see a business decision, they saw a tragedy. The headlines screamed that David was being forced into retirement, or, more bizarrely, that he was embroiled in a massive corporate lawsuit that would see him banned from wrenching for life. The David is dead allegations usually peak during his brief hiatuses between filming projects. In early 2026, a fake news site used a thumbnail of a wrecked Jeep Wagoneer to suggest that a desert rescue had gone fatally wrong. The reality of his mishaps is much more interesting. David has spent the last 2 years navigating the jail of corporate restructuring. After decades in the magazine and network television world, he found himself in a landscape where the old rules didn't apply. The real struggle wasn't a physical one, but a battle for creative freedom. Fans mistook his silence during contract negotiations for a total disappearance from the world. They thought he was locked away in some legal dungeon, when he was actually just waiting for the right moment to launch his own independent ventures. Then there is the mischief of his collaboration with Derek, when they teamed up for roadworthy rescues and duct-tape drags. The purest fans of both camps predicted a total disaster. They saw two titans in one shop and assumed there would be a massive ego clash that would end in a lawsuit. Instead, the only trouble they found was a shared inability to say no to a terrible car. Their partnership has become the ultimate answer to the talks of David's retirement. Far from being done, David is more active in 2026 than he has been in a decade, using his newfound independence to film the kind of raw, unfiltered content that the suits used to veto. He's not in a corporate cage anymore. He's out in the desert, usually trying to figure out why a 97-year-old Ford won't hold an idle. The speculations about his health or legal status often stem from how he handles the Eleanor-style drama of the automotive world. Because David has been around so long, he's seen the dark side of copyright law and the police who patrol the hobby for profit. In 2025, there was a whisper that he had been sued into oblivion over a build that looked too much like a protected trademark. While it made for a riveting forum thread, the truth was that David had simply become a master of avoiding that kind of legal trap. He isn't running from the law, he's just too smart to get caught in the same nets as the amateurs. He knows where the line is between a sketchy build and a legal nightmare, and he's spent his 2026 season teaching a new generation how to navigate those waters. One of the most persistent theories is that David is the silent partner behind Derek's recent land acquisitions, and that they are building a mechanical commune to hide their assets from the taxman. This is the kind of high-level fanfiction that populates the darker corners of the web. The reality is that they are just two friends who realized that if they didn't buy up the land around them, the weirdo fans would keep showing up in their driveways at midnight. The jail they are trying to avoid is the one made of public intrusion and a lack of privacy. By 2026, David has helped Derek understand that the most important tool in the shop isn't a welder. It's a high-quality gate with a very strong lock. The cast of Vice Grip Garage in 2026 is a group of survivors. They've survived the physical dangers of the shop, the legal traps of the industry, and the unrelenting curiosity of a digital audience that treats their lives like a soap opera. Whether it's Derek's close calls, Jessica's strategic retreat, or David's corporate escapes, they've proven that the only way to stay out of trouble is to keep moving forward. They aren't in jail, and they aren't gone. They're just deep in the middle of the next big story, and as long as they have a wrench in their hand and a camera in the shop, the rumors don't stand a chance. Their absence from the spotlight isn't a sign of a scandal. It's a sign of a job well done. As long as the camera is rolling and the focus is sharp, the ghosts in the lens are doing exactly what they were hired to do. Thanks for sticking until the end. Subscribe to the channel for more.